Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Lynn Rule. I'm a parent consultant with the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, and I appreciate you all coming on for day 2 of CPAC Goes Back to School. So just a little bit of background, if you are not familiar with us, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, every state is required to have a Parent Training Information Center. And for the state of Connecticut, CPAC serves that purpose. So we are here today to try to help answer some of the questions that you all may be experiencing as we go through this back to school process that is changing rapidly. And so the information we have for you now is what we know as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. We are very happy that today joining us is the Bureau Chief from the state of Connecticut Special Education, Bryan Klimklitz. Bryan, welcome. Would you like to say a word or two to welcome everyone?
Thank you, Lynn. Glad to be here. I appreciate the invite and looking forward to the session.
Very good. So we also want to remind everyone that we are doing Facebook Live, and this session will also be available for upload on YouTube. So in the event that you are asking questions, just be mindful of any personal information that you do choose to share, because this is a public forum. We are also not attorneys, and we will not be providing any specific information as it relates to any decisions that you need to make. I'd like to introduce my co-hosts here, Leona and Lisa. Leona, would you like to say hello? And she's muted.
Sorry, I was typing in Facebook so that we could welcome everybody out there as well. So yes, I'm excited to be here today on our second day of our 4-part series. So my name is Leona Domchek, and I am a parent consultant with CPAC as well. And I have 3 boys, 2 on an IEP and 1 on a 504. And I look forward to today. Thank you, Bryan, for joining us.
Lisa?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out again for day 2. We're so happy to see all of you. My name is Lisa Opert. I'm also a parent consultant with CPAC. I have 4 children, 2 of which have IEPs.
Okay, so welcome. So today we are going to be talking a little bit about some concerns, fears, and changes. And the focus is really going to be a little bit more on the changes, and we'll be talking in terms of questions with respect to concerns and fears that everyone may have. So yesterday we discussed in some pretty broad terms some of the various models that are being implemented across the state. And I just wanted to share quickly an updated map from the one that we saw yesterday. So again, the Connecticut Examiner did a story today on how public schools by district were reopening for the fall of 2020. You can see there are still some that are undecided. Some of these colors may have changed from what we saw yesterday. And as we discussed yesterday, within those models, there are many changes, many variations. And so it's very important that you are very familiar with what model is being implemented in your respective district. I also wanted to take a moment to mention that this is really all about numbers. And so if you are currently opting into remote learning, and you should make a decision to go to a hybrid model, if your district has a hybrid model in place, or even a full in-person, you need to be cognizant of the fact that the district will need some time to be able to accommodate this, because we are also looking at how many children we have in each class. And depending upon how things are being split up, they may need a couple of days to put that in place. So I just wanted to go back to that point from yesterday. Okay, so as we had discussed yesterday, the model that is, the state of Connecticut has provided guidance to return to school. It was called Adapt, Advance, and Achieve. It is the state's plan. And in addition to that very lengthy plan, there were addendums that were put in place. And one of the pieces we're going to be talking about today specifically is Addendum 6, which relates to educating students with disabilities. So the key term today is going to be communication. And I really want to stress that today. Yesterday, we were stressing understanding the models that were in place. Today, we really want to talk about communication. Communication between district staff and families is going to be key in providing quality instruction at any time, but it's even more important during this time of completely different situations. So whether your school district has determined that instruction is going to be delivered full in person, hybrid, or even an opt into remote learning, communication is going to really be key. So as individuals who have children who may be receiving special education services, you're probably very concerned about IEP implementation and what exactly is that going to look like, especially if you have opted into remote learning. The IEPs are developed as if a student is participating in full-time in-school learning. So when you are in school, these are the services and these are the accommodations and the modifications that are going to be put in place. But if you are opting into remote learning, the IEP still needs to be implemented. So that FAPE, free and appropriate public education, that we often talk about is still necessary. It's still going to happen. But how that IEP is now going to be implemented is going to look different. And in order to accommodate that, there is a document that has been created called a Learning Model Iep Implementation Plan. It's a mouthful. And it will illustrate the services that the district is prepared to deliver and the model and the mood that they are going to deliver them in. So when I mentioned before about communication, this is really going to be effective. This is going to really be necessary in order for this implementation to be effective. Communicating with your staff, communicating with the teachers, communicating with the case manager, and how that IEP is going to be delivered. So this does not replace your child's IEP. It is a temporary tool to implement the IEP during COVID. It is only required if adjustments need to be made for implementation. So if you are looking at speech services that would be provided in person and you are remote learning, then you are not going to be getting speech services necessarily in person. And so now there needs to be a change to that. And it must be developed with input from the parent and or the student. So if a student is old enough to be able to have conversations about their IEPs, then they would also be included. The Learning Model IEP contains a section to document the special ed and related services that the student is going to receive remotely. This documentation must include the model of instruction, the mode of instruction, the IEP goals, and the manner in which they are going to be delivered. So this is what the document looks like. And you can see that there is a section here for the description of model, how they are going to be delivering the services, what goals this particular line item would apply to, the frequency duration, we're familiar with that, that's indicated on the IEP, and the service that is going to be implemented. Bryan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am going to. Do you want to add anything in with respect to implementation of this IEP plan? I think you're muted, Bryan.
Thank you, Lynn. I really appreciate the invite once again and the opportunity to share information and to collaborate as we look to support parents and educators with this new process. The couple things that I wanted to mention is that that this implementation plan may be needed even if your school district is in a full in-school mode. And I'll give you an example for that. So we would expect most students that are in full instruction 5 days a week, which some districts are, that their IEPs can be implemented as they're designed. You mentioned earlier, Lynn, that IEPs are designed as if school were in session during typical times, and that is FAPE, that is what the student needs to progress toward those goals. If a safety measure that the school's taking is affecting the special education or related services in any way, this is a tool that can be used to document that, again, with collaboration with parents. I'm going to give an example of if that I know from a district, from a director that asked a question. If your child's IEP says that they're in a co-taught class and that class meets 5 days a week for 50 minutes. However, the schedule of the school has been adjusted because of COVID, and classes are now shortened, providing for an earlier release time or time at the end of the day where teachers collaborate remotely with students. And instead of 50 minutes, that co-taught class is now 35 minutes long. This implementation plan would be a document used as a tool to document that change and that goal and objective. And so that would be one scenario. Another scenario where school is fully in session is if, for example, due to cohorting or another safety precaution that the school is taking, the site in which your student received services changes. If they used to receive services in a resource room setting, or if, just flip back up one more, Lynn, back
Sorry.
to the previous, that's okay. If it changes from a resource room to the general education setting, or the other way around, if it's the general education setting previously and now it's more of a resource room, or that services is delivered remotely, even though your child is in the building. Again, this is a tool that can be used to document that. In the hybrid scenario, if your school is opening in hybrid, then that would be the model that was stated there. And then the IEP services may be delivered as designed. For example, if your child is a disability category of speech and language only, just to use an example, and receives speech and language support times weekly times 30 minutes, and your child's in school 3 days a week, and those services are able to be met in person, then there really isn't a need for this implementation plan. However, if there is a change or an adjustment, we would expect more students to need adjustments and changes so that those remote services can be documented on this form. If the district goes to full remote as an option, then we would expect most students to need this implementation plan. The second page of this, which is your next slide, which is the parent opt-in, this is a parent voluntary choice, a unilateral choice that the parent's making. So in these cases, the district would either say that they are prepared to offer the IEP as it's designed, or the top section, which was the previous slide, they would show you how the services are going to be offered either in full in-person or remote, hybrid. And then they would communicate that parent opt-in, because the parent's choosing voluntarily to opt into full remote services, that would be documented on the second page of that form. And there could be some limitations to that. So the school district would have to communicate any limitations that would arise because of a full remote program rather than in person. So I have some more examples, but I'll stop there because I don't want to take up too much more time, but I'm happy to provide, if there are questions, to try to provide more clarity and again, take any questions that arise.
So with the next piece that I would like to talk about briefly though, Brian, is what would happen in the event that we go back to the school building in and of itself closes because there is a spike in cases. And so we need to move the entire district to remote learning or to distance learning. So how we would then handle these types of situations and what would happen to those parents who had already been opting into full remote and what they would now be facing.
Yeah, so this in practice has not happened yet. So I think it's you know, the districts and the parents are going to do their best to navigate that scenario, but the need for opting into remote would no longer be needed.
Correct.
So if all students are remote, it's not based on a choice at this point. It's based on a necessity because of a public health mandate, and there would be a shift to remote learning for all kids. And that would be so the second section would no longer apply here. The first section where the remote, with a mode of instruction, that would be full remote. And then the services within the IEP would be articulated. So there would be a description of how and when those IEP required services related services and specialized instruction would be delivered. So if we had our crystal ball and we could say, my school district is probably going to have all 3 models this year. We're opening full in person, or we're opening in hybrid, and we eventually might go full remote, and we eventually might go back to hybrid or back to full remote. This is a tool that can be utilized to say, if you think of it like a contingency plan, this is a team planning for all 3 scenarios. We know the start of the school year is only a few days away for some and only a couple weeks away for others. So you're going to prioritize how your school is opening to understand how your child's services are going to be delivered. So that's a starting point. And this document will be a base and a foundation to move through the models as the school year progresses and as the virus progresses.
And so as we approach the start of school, I know that from having some conversations with some friends of mine who have opted into remote learning, they are concerned right now about what they're going to be facing when they go back to school as far as delivery of services for their children. Everyone always looks back to what happened during the spring. So we're really trying to get a point across to people that this is a different scenario now. This is not like what we faced in the spring. And hopefully we're going to learn from the mistakes that we made and situations that may have occurred back then as we move forward. So we would like to also mention to parents that if they have not yet received any sort of communication from their school, just like we said at the beginning that communication was key, that they should reach out to their district. They should reach out to their principal, the case manager, the guidance counselor, whomever is the person that they normally talk to, and discuss what this model implementation plan would look like. I do want to take a pause right now and see if we have some questions, because I'm sure this was a lot of information to take in a relatively short period of time, and I know people are going to have questions. So I'd like to see if anyone has anything that they want additional information on, or if they have any specific questions. You can unmute yourself or raise your hand, put it in the chat. Do we have anything in the chat yet or on Facebook? Lisa, Leona?
So Lynn, while it doesn't seem like there's any questions at the moment, I just wanted to comment on your what you just said, in that this is a different scenario than March through June. No question about it. When the pandemic first hit, and then there was the statewide closure of all school classrooms. We had guidance documents that came out in late March and early April, indicating that from what we had heard from the federal government at that time and all the information that we had, is that IEPs were being implemented to the greatest extent possible within that context. That is not the case to start the school year. IEPs are being implemented. The districts have flexibility in how IEP services can be implemented, but the IEP will be implemented just like any other school year. It's just a matter of how and what mode, using that term from our plan, that those specialized instruction and the related services will be delivered. So that the parent opt-in is a little different than that. Because the school is opening up, the parents are concerned, as you mentioned, what that's going to look like for their son or daughter. And even though it's a voluntary choice, it's a very difficult choice for parents, and in some cases a really impossible choice, in concerns on either safety concerns on one hand and education concerns on the other hand. So our guidance has asked districts to provide a comprehensive remote experience for parents who opt in into sports services. So it's safe to say, if there hasn't been communication at this point in time, like you said, to encourage parents to reach out to their case managers, to reach out to their teachers and principals to try to get more information about what that will look like. Understanding that this week staff have come back for the most. Staff are beginning to come back for professional development and planning. I think your keys and CPAC's keys that you have identified is one, are great, great advice, understanding your district's plan, and then the communication as a foundation for everything moving forward. And this is a new way to start the school year. No one's ever experienced this before. But as you mentioned, there are certainly lessons learned from the spring that were carried in and planned for over the summer. And as I mentioned, the IEPs from the start of the school year should be implemented, must be implemented, again, depending on the mode that is determined.
And one of the other things that we have also talked about in some of the calls that we've had over the summer was for parents to have documented some of the challenges that they've witnessed over the course of the last 5 months of the school year. And so that information, to be able, again, communicating and sharing that with the district, will also help in guiding some of these goals and objectives that are being written. And again, any changes that need to be made to those through this IEP implementation plan.
Yeah. And districts are processing a tremendous amount of information in a short amount of time. You know, that's another aspect of this. Their own staffing, they're trying to get information around their own staffing, which teachers and paraprofessionals will be in the building, which will need to work remotely because of health reasons, for example, and understanding which students will be in the building and which students will not be in the building. And everyone knows the first couple weeks of school with transportation and scheduling, there's all of these issues to work out. And that's going to happen. And this year it's going to be even more complex from the school's logistics point of view. So I think, you know, districts have been preparing and have been planning. But as you said, to start off, this is the information that we have as of 3 o'clock today.
Mm-hmm.
There's been several ideations and adjustments that districts have had to make as well. And the pandemic is driving these decisions. And I've just been so encouraged by the outreach from parents, from our partners at CPAC and CIRC and the RESC Alliance, and working together to try to support both students and families as well as educators for this tremendously challenging task to get the school started in a positive way. But I'm hopeful that the strategies that are being put in place and the measures that schools and parents are taking will pay off, and will I think once we get back to school, we'll have a better sense of the issues that arise, good and bad. What's working? How can we build on what's working? And then how can we problem solve the issues that arise based on the first few weeks of school opening? So the State Department of Education will continue to provide technical assistance and additional guidance where needed, and we'll be relying on CPAC to help us understand what's happening at that school level and implementation level. So we look forward to the continued collaboration.
And something else too, to also keep in mind when we are looking at goals and objectives being provided in an opt into a remote setting, the technology that's necessary in order to put those in place. So for some folks, they may need some assistive technology that they have not been able to receive as of yet. And so that also needs to be taken into account when looking at this IEP implementation model to move forward.
No question, yeah, the equipment and the connectivity continue to be priorities for the state to ensure that all students have equal access, and that foundational access to education is so critical. I know the governor has made a strong commitment, financial commitment, to be able to address those issues.
I think we had a question that came in the chat, right?
Okay.
Yes, we did. I'm just trying to get a little clarification, but it says, are districts encouraged to provide all in-person special education instruction and related services to students unable to access and successfully participate in a remote model of service provision? And so what I don't know is how they're returning to school. So maybe if they just want to clarify.
Sure.
Jamie, if you can unmute yourself, if you just want to clarify how you're returning.
It looks like she typed in hybrid there.
Okay, there you go. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just, thank you very much. Yes, I was specifically speaking of hybrid. So.
Yeah. So in our guidance document, we did emphasize the consideration that schools should take for in-person services. Understanding, again, that's how IEPs are designed, and that's most aligned with least restrictive environment, for example, within that context. But the always with safety and health in mind, we have encouraged populations of students that have had particularly challenged or variable success accessing remote learning to look at in-person services more frequently than general education students. So that we did articulate that in our plan in our Addendum 6 and continue to encourage that. We've heard variable concerns or questions around that, both from the district and the parents. Some parents requesting more in person than the district's able to provide. Sometimes the district providing in person where the parents aren't able to or make the decision not to access more in person. So again, that it goes back to communication and understanding your program's capabilities that are able to maintain the safe delivery of services in special education. That's kind of a long-winded answer to say yes, we are encouraging in person whenever possible and for students with IEPs.
So there's another question. Thank you so much, Brian. Will the learning implementation form only be used for special education students getting services remotely? And I think that you already kind of brushed upon that, but maybe just to refresh quickly.
Yeah, the Learning Model Iep implementation plan will be utilized if there's any adjustments needed to the IEP service delivery grid, if you think about it that way. So if something is different than what page 11 on the IEP document, that service delivery grid indicates, then it would be used. And I gave an example of even if your child is in full in-person 5 days a week, there may be an adjustment where they are accessing remote services within the building, or there's a change in the site. So those are two examples that one would be a remote, so a remote application of that. But if the site changed for the purposes of either cohorting or another safety activity, we know that LRE requirements have not gone away. So there has to be a conversation with the parent, interaction, understanding about how the student's accessing services. Is that needed or necessary to keep the student safe, and then documented in the IEP implementation plan. So for the most part, yes, any remote services that are being provided, but even in some, there could be some circumstances where in person it's still needed.
And we just put in the chat the link to that Addendum 6. And so anyone who has not yet had an opportunity to take a look at that, if you have some specific questions as it relates to the delivery of special education services, I would highly encourage you to take a look at that, read through the document. It was in that footnote on, I believe it's the second page, that we referenced the IEP learning implementation model. So we did put that in the chat, and I think we were going to copy that to Facebook also for those that are watching on Facebook Live. Does anyone have any other questions, especially as it relates to either delivery of services or some of the fears that you're having as we are rapidly approaching the start of our school time? Summer's come to an end, Labor Day is next week or the week after. So are there any other questions or concerns or fears that you have as we move into this very different back to school year? I think people are afraid to ask questions. That's probably the biggest fear.
Well, and I think too is that because I did see a comment on Facebook, and we've heard it, throughout helping parents is actually the word fear. Like they're scared about going back and what it's going to be like, and we all have to make these very personal decisions for our families. And there's a give and take to every decision that we make, which we've talked about. And so I think a lot of that right now is everybody wrapping their heads around that. And so someone did post that on Facebook, and I think everybody, so many families are in that exact same spot. The parents are thinking, was this the right decision? Where do we go from here? How can I change my mind if it's not right? And I think we have to embrace that and understand it and work with the district to make the best individual plans we can, understanding that we're going back in a pandemic. Like Bryan said, we've never gone back to school like this.
Right.
So everything is unknown, and that's scary.
And I think also it's important to remember that everyone that we're going to encounter at the school district, from the superintendent to the people who are working in central office to the faculty, the principals, everyone has these same question marks swirling around the top of their head. And we are all in an environment, in a situation that we've never dealt with before. And so I think that it's important to be able to have as much planning done ahead of time. And as we started this session today, we talked about communication, and I think that's really the #1 priority for the next couple of weeks, to be sure that you've communicated with your school and that you understand what it is that they are sharing with you. So if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you feel that the delivery of services is not what you were looking for, it's not what you were expecting, it's very important that you would at that point perhaps ask for a PPT meeting in order to get through and reevaluate what you have in front of you. So I don't know, well, Leona, there you go.
Yeah, is there any more questions out there? I don't have any in Facebook right now. It looks like our chat is clear. We definitely want to thank everybody for coming. Lisa, do you want to talk about what we're going to go over tomorrow?
Well, thanks so much. Tomorrow we are going to talk about cohorting and what it will look like or could look like in your school, and talk about what that means for all different aspects of the day. So come join us. We'd love to have you. Thank you again, Bryan, for coming. You always help clarify so many questions so kindly, so we appreciate it. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Lisa. If anybody has any questions, or if you're watching this later on Facebook, feel free to either comment on Facebook, we will double check, but always feel free to contact us. The information is in the chat, and it's posted on Facebook as well. So feel free to reach out to us.
I just wanted to also thank Bryan, and if you have any last parting words that you'd like to share with our families, we'd love to open the floor to you.
Just thank you, Beth, for the invite once again, and the collaboration with CPAC. It's just been such a tremendous support to the Bureau to have partners with the PTI, as you mentioned, and the support that you provide for families. And I wish everyone well. Like you said, Lynn, we're all in this together, educators and parents. The question marks that we have together, we'll work through, and we'll do what's best. And as long as we keep students at the center of our decisions and at the center of these processes, we're going to be okay. And I appreciate the ongoing efforts that CPAC's making to reach out to families to make sure that we understand where supports are needed, where is clarification needed to be provided. So thanks again for the invite, and be well, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bryan, for joining us, for your insight. It's always helpful. And we hope to see all of you tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and we will talk about cohorting as CPAC goes back to school continues. So thank you all very much. Bye.